mainly due to his high-profile social circle, which included Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and Queen Elizabeth's son, Prince Andrew. But one of the more bewildering facts of the whole situation, and something most were unaware of, is that Epstein had already been convicted as a sex offender for over 10 years.
Could you please give us your name?
Jeffrey Epstein.
Is it true, sir, that you have what's been described as an egg-shaped penis? One witness described your penis as oval-shaped and claimed when erect it was thick towards the bottom but was thin and small towards the head portion and called it egg-shaped. Those are not my words, I apologize. But as Mr. Critton has stated, that this is a...
His original charges were 4 counts of unlawful sex with a minor and 1 count of sexual abuse, but his high-end attorneys managed to whittle it down to just 1 count of procuring a minor for prostitution, and he served just over 1 year in prison. While Trump and Clinton allegedly cut ties with Epstein after his arrest, Prince Andrew continued the relationship and visited Epstein multiple times at his properties both in the States and also on his private island in the Caribbean, where he allegedly partook in what the media dubbed orgy parties with underage girls who were solicited for sex. One of the alleged victims even went public, stating that she was trafficked and then forced to have sex with Prince Andrew on 3 separate occasions. A photograph of them together surfaced in the media, and many consider it to be substantial evidence to back up the allegations. On the 10th of August 2019, Jeffrey Epstein died under extremely suspicious circumstances, with his death being officially ruled a suicide. This only added fuel to the fire, and the public scrutiny aimed at Prince Andrew intensified over the following months. Then, on the 16th of November, he made the extraordinary decision to address the allegations in a televised interview.
We've come to Buckingham Palace in highly unusual circumstances. Normally, we'd be discussing your work, your duty. We'll come on to that. But today, you've chosen to speak out for the first time. Why have you decided to talk now?
Because there is no good time to talk about Mr. Epstein and all things associated.
All of this goes back to your friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. How did you first become friends? How did you meet?
Well, I met through his girlfriend.
What does unlisted mean? I don't know what unlisted means. You can't search for it? They took it down because of politics, not TOS. Alright, so that is not my problem. That's like a YouTube channel problem.
Back in 1999, and I'd known her since she was at university in the UK. And it would be, to some extent, a stretch to say that as it were, we were close friends. I mean, we were friends because of other people.
This is known as defensive communication. He is responding in a defensive manner due to his own self-perceived flaw. The term "a close friend" is both subjective and ambiguous. Essentially, anyone can label a friend as not being close if they choose to interpret it that way, especially if it facilitates self-preservation. What's more telling is the fact that he felt the need to say it. If he was certain of his own innocence and morality, then he would be more likely to express concern over his own judge of character, rather than attempting to downplay the relationship. It's also important to note his lack of conviction when making this statement.
And it would be, to some extent, a stretch to say that as it were, we were close friends. I mean, we were friends because of other people. And I had a lot of opportunity to go to the United States, but I didn't have much time with him. I suppose I saw him once or twice a year, perhaps maybe maximum of 3 times a year.
More defensive communication. He is now trying to downplay his frequency of visits by using the adverb only, as in, I only visited a convicted pedophile 3 times a year, so there's no way I can be guilty. The simple fact is that the frequency of visits are irrelevant. He could have visited once every decade and still committed an untold number of sex crimes against children.
And quite often, if I was in the United States and doing things, and if he wasn't there, he would say, well, why don't you come and use my houses? So I said, that's very kind, thank you very much indeed. But it would be a considerable stretch to say that he was a very, very close friend. But he had the most extraordinary ability to bring extraordinary people together. And that's the bit that I remember, is going to the dinner parties.
Instead of just saying, I remember going to the dinner parties, he was compelled to assert that it was all he remembered, essentially stating that anything else that may have occurred was inconsequential, and therefore couldn't have been nefarious.
Where you would meet academics, politicians, people from the United Nations. I mean, it was a cosmopolitan group of what I would describe as US eminence.
Was that his appeal then? Was that what you...
This was a highly expressive and forcible reaction to such a simple question. Imagine if you were in his position, but completely innocent, void of any wrongdoing whatsoever. This would seem like just a normal question, and you would most likely respond in a casual manner. But if you were guilty, your thought process would be constantly focused on the immediate threat of the present moment. And this question could appear more like an accusation, which could be argued was the reason for Andrew's agitated response.
Because you were perceived by the public as being the party prince.
This is a very intriguing moment of the interview. The claim of him being the so-called party prince isn't a damning assertion. Liking to go out and party doesn't make you a bad person, and the claim is completely insignificant compared to the more serious allegations against him. He goes on to claim that the statement is untrue, but closely observe his demeanor and contortions. He becomes far more expressive in this refuting statement compared to the refuting statements made earlier, and the probable reason for this will be revealed in a moment.
Was that something
Well,
you
I
shared?
think that's also a bit of a stretch. I don't know why I've collected that title, because I never have really partied.
The question was non-incriminating, so it makes little sense as to why he would be so stuttery and spurious in his response. It could be argued that this was an attempt to portray his non-verbal cues while lying. He is essentially saying, look, this is how bad I am at lying, so any slightly less obvious tells at a later stage can be overlooked.
I was single for quite a long time, in the early 80s, but then after I got married I was very happy.
Shaking his head while making an assertive statement, the movement doesn't correlate with the message. Most body language experts would assert that he is lying here, although his heightened state of focus on the more damning elements may have influenced this.
And I've never really felt the need to go and party.
Am I right in thinking you threw a birthday party for Epstein's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, at Sandringham?
No, it was a shooting weekend.
A shooting weekend?
Just a straightforward shooting weekend.
The expression on his face is as if he's been accused of something, but the interviewer had only asked if he had thrown a party. It's as if the word party has some damnatory connotations to it, hence the worried look, as well as his assertion that it was just a straightforward shooting weekend, whatever that is.
But during these times that he was a guest at Windsor Castle at Sandringham, the shooting weekend, we now know that he was and had been procuring young girls for sex trafficking.
We now know that.
Right, no further links.
At the time, there was no indication to me or anybody else that that was what he was doing.
The next moment is fascinating. He breaks eye contact immediately after making his statement, arguably because it was a pure fabrication, and he wasn't comfortable with the reporter's gaze.
And certainly, when I saw him either in the United States...
He starts off a new sentence, giving a justification for the broken eye contact, yet appears to be trying to think up a related statement on the spot. People do this sometimes when they are uncomfortable. They abruptly say the first clause of a sentence as a means to escape an uncomfortable silence, but they then have to think up the next clause directly on the spot. In the next moments, Andrew realizes that the initial clause he thought up fits in perfectly with his next assertion.
Well, no, when I saw him
That's
in the
a lot
States,
of
when I was staying in his
analyzing.
houses in the United States.
Sometimes you just want to word it
absolutely
properly
no
so it doesn't come out wrong.
Let's watch that again.
You take your time after
certainly.
starting something.
When
If
I
I
saw
speak,
him
I'm
either
in
the
trouble.
United States. Well, no, when I saw him in the United States, or when I was staying in his houses in the United States, there was no indication.
He was convicted of
Yep.
soliciting and procuring a minor for prostitution. He was jailed. This was
Yes.
your friend. How
Yes.
did you feel about it?
Well, I ceased contact with him after I was aware that he was under investigation, and that was later on in 2006. And I wasn't in touch with him again until 2010. So.
Wait, so I'm a little bit behind on this
it's
shit.
one of those things
This
if someone's going
guy,
through that sort of thing. Well, I'm terribly sorry. I can't
did he
So
get
no contact.
When he was
Did he
serving
get,
time,
like,
there was no
in trouble
call,
or
no letter,
no?
nothing.
Like actual trouble, legal.
He was
Did he get
released
like something?
in July.
No.
Within months, by December of 2010, you went to stay with him at his New York mansion. Why? Why were you staying
Of course
with a
not, he's
convicted
rich.
sex offender?
Right.
Wasn't
I
Epstein
have
rich?
always, ever since this has happened, and since this has become, as it were, public knowledge that I was there, I've questioned myself as to why did I go, what was I doing?
But he's a
and
prince.
Was it the right thing to do?
He has just confirmed that he only started questioning his actions to visit a sex offender since it became public knowledge, essentially stating that he's only worried about what others think of his actions rather than what he thinks of his actions.
Now, I went there with the sole purpose of saying to him that because he had been convicted, it was inappropriate for us to be seen together. And I had a number of people counsel me in both directions, either to go and see him or not to go and see him. And I took the judgment call that because this was serious, and I felt that doing it over the telephone was the chicken's way of doing it. I had to go and see him and talk to him.
Much like a breakup after a long-term relationship, telling someone the news face-to-face is a sign of respect. He has essentially just stated that he still held a sex offender in high regard.
And I went to see him,
That's true.
and I was doing a number of other things in New York at the time, and we had an opportunity to go for a walk in the park, and that was the conversation, coincidentally, that was photographed, which was when I said to him, I said, look, because of what has happened, I don't think it is appropriate that we should remain in contact. And by mutual agreement during that walk in the park, we decided that we would part company, and I left, I think it was the next day. And to this day, I never had any contact with him from that day forward.
He didn't leave the next day. He stayed at Epstein's residence for 4 days after. It must have been pretty awkward staying at someone's house for 4 nights after telling them you want nothing to do with them anymore.
What did he say when you told him that you were breaking the
Alright,
friendship?
it's
I can't watch the whole thing because it's too long, but it's pretty funny. Pretty funny.
If you liked the video, make sure to leave a like and a comment on what you want to see next.